Well, let's deep dive into Medellin. I want to paint the picture from the perspective of someone who's maybe already a digital nomad, interested in digital nomading. So they're thinking about spending, let's say, 1 to 3, maybe more months in Medellin. They're thinking about working remotely. What are your general thoughts, pros and cons on Medellin?
Medellin's beautiful. It's one of my favorite cities. I'm almost reluctant to share that because it's a big city, but it's not the biggest city, so we don't want to overwhelm with foreigners necessarily. But it's this one of the cities of eternal spring. So it's somewhere between 65 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit all year round. It's a very warm culture, and it's known even in the country to be a warm and welcoming city, friendly to foreigners. There are, of course, things where I remind myself and people who come to visit, this is not your home. There are things here that you don't understand. You should be careful about where you go at night. I don't think it's a dangerous city, but I do think it's a city where you need to be street smart a little bit. But that said, it's an international city. It's a business oriented city. I feel like a lot of the nomad hotspots are cute beach towns and places to relax and party and have a good time. I think it's great, but I'm a professional with a career, and I like to meet other professionals with careers, and I like it if the local population is like that too. So it feels to me in that way, and no dig against it, but to me, Playa del Carmen and Chiang Mai, the digital nomads who visit there may be all sorts of professionals, but the local community is it's tourist. It's more touristic community. The people you meet are the most educated people, are the ones who are serving the tourist. But you come to a city like Medellin, Colombia, or Mexico City, or maybe Istanbul, and it's a city where the locals are also professionals, and so you can meet people who are kind of on this common and even ground. So I love that a lot. The meat's really good. The fruits and vegetables are fresh.
Well, I'll add on to say I spent about 6 weeks in Medellin. It's definitely one of the favorite places I've been to of the 18 different kind of nomad destinations I've been to. And some of the things that stick out to me are the dancing and just the nightlife. I think also just the community. It's one of the similar, I suppose, to Playa del Carmen and Chiang Mai, which you referenced. There's just such a large community of expats and nomads, and it's so easy to meet people, which for people who are thinking about getting into digital nomading or think about where do I start, I definitely recommend starting in one of the hubs is a great way to land on your feet, because it's just so dynamic and easy to meet other people.
Absolutely.
What do you think? I was going to ask, what are some of your biggest, any cons for Medellin to share?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, beyond, I would say no major cons. There are cultural differences. You're in a different place. And so sometimes there are people from the US who are frustrated, for example, with the way that business works, and they want it to be a little more efficient. I have a friend who said, yeah, well, when you don't grow up in a capitalist, society, you don't have capitalist values, and you aren't motivated by money all the time. You're motivated by other things. And I think when you dig into the more local aspect, you find more and more it's the people are motivated by different values and different mechanisms than place that I come from. There are elements, I think like the street smarts and the being aware, and kind of I don't walk around with 2 earbuds in. I walk around with 1 at most. I just want to be aware. There are elements of that can feel perhaps like a con, but again, I do think it's the reality of being in the bigger, truer world.
That makes sense. What are your thoughts on Wi-Fi? Wi-Fi speeds, Wi-Fi reliability, are there power outages?
95% of the time, amazing. Good to great. You can always, if you're doing Airbnbs and hostels and things like that, you can always ask about the Wi-Fi. They understand that question. For me, if I'm doing the speed test all the time, so I know that my minimum is 20 Mbps. And that's enough to get Zoom done reliably, screen sharing, things like that. Most places have at least that. A lot of places have 100. If you're going to stay at a place for a while, you can usually order faster, stronger cable through to come in. So that's been great. There are times when the electricity goes out for a couple of hours. I'd say that happens once a quarter. There are times when we were in a place where when the Wi-Fi is working, it's going at 100 and it's amazing. And then it just has signal drops here and there. So it's not perfect, but I'd say it's not an issue that I notice often. And when I do, it passes quickly. So I'm usually finding myself pretty comfortable. But as a professional on video calls a lot, it is something I look for before I move into a new place. Tons of co-working places that also keep up reliable Wi-Fi. Tons of, especially in the Poblado neighborhood, tons of cafes that foreigners are working at and finding success in.
And cost of living, apartments, food, how do you equate cost of living to US and other places?
In my mind, most of the cost of living items are a third of what they are in at least the Bay Area. So that's kind of which is dramatic, right? Because Bay Area is one of the most expensive places in the world. So it's dramatic to compare it to other places. It's just what I know. But I think about it as being about a third. So I'm living in a similar apartment that I would in the Bay Area for about a third of the price. So, if you're a foreigner coming to Airbnb, you'd expect to find someplace comfortable anywhere from like $700 to $1,200 a month. If you're more local and maybe you're willing to furnish the place and stay a little bit longer, you can find comfortable places in great neighborhoods for maybe as little as $400 or $500 a month. It takes a little bit of doing, but it can be done. Lunch is $5 and it's a healthy lunch. And the food is not processed in the way that I feel that US food is. The chicken tastes a little better. The vegetables are a little bit fresher. Papaya, I thought papaya was gross in the US. I just thought it was a gross tasting fruit. It has a weird taste to it. Here, it's a totally different fruit. I don't understand how that works, but it is. So I find it economically to be, it's easier to be comfortable here than it is in most places in the US.
Interesting. And on the weather side, with it being eternal spring and it seems like the climate's pretty flat year round, would you say there aren't necessarily better or worse months? It's pretty equal across the spectrum?
We do have one or two, I want to say two, what the locals call rainy seasons, which is a couple straight months where it rains almost every day for maybe an hour. And then once or twice a week, you'll have this like heavy downpour. So that, for me, I haven't found that to be an issue, but if you're a person who's trying to do a lot of touristic things, be out about a lot, then you may find that those months are difficult. We're in that season now, and it's a beautiful spring. It's another beautiful spring day, but 2 days ago we had like an all rainy day.
And then on the nightlife side, I loved the El Poblado nightlife, where it's tons of bars and restaurants all next to each other. Yeah, any thoughts on the nightlife?
People love it. I'm not a big nightlife person. I go to sleep by like 10 or 10:30, so it's rare that I'm out, but people love it. There's a lot to do, especially in the Poblado neighborhoods. And dancing it's funny. There are all these places to dance. If you're just learning, beginner classes for a Colombian are different than beginner classes for a foreigner. I'll just say that. Like beginner classes, like I've seen dance, and if you're a Colombian, it's like beginner is just like on a whole different level. So you got to find like the gringo classes.
So last question on Medellin, which would be best neighborhoods to live in, and how do you recommend booking housing? I
think if you're coming in for the first time, if ideally, if you can do it, I would say a co-living space in Poblado is your best bet. I have trouble with co-living spaces, hostels, things like that, just because sometimes they can be a little noisy for me and the kind of work I do. I can't always find a spot. So, but we have a Selena here. I've used the co-working. I haven't been in one of the rooms, but Selena's kind of this, it's a chain in Latin America that is pretty consistent in living conditions. It's a little more expensive than other things you could find, but instant community, a lot of resources, Airbnb. But if you're coming for the first time, I would say something like that, one of these co-living spaces, hostels, or Airbnb into the Poblado neighborhood. That's how you start. It's very friendly to foreigners. It's got international cuisine as well as local cuisine. Many of the staff, the people around you, they're going to speak at least enough English to help you go shopping, buy food, understand the neighborhood a little better, some much more. Lots of language exchanges. So everything you want is in Poblado. You probably want to start there. And then if you're here a little bit longer, you'll learn about these other neighborhoods like Laureles, Envigado. Those are kind of like the next place that foreigners go when they're here a little bit longer. They don't need to party every night. They are a little more comfortable with Spanish. And I love personally the Laureles neighborhood because it's like Poblado but calmer and more family oriented, and it's just like a little more green even though Poblado is already super green and beautiful. But yeah, I think you start in Poblado, not too far from Parque Poblado or from the neighborhood called Provenza.